All right, hello everybody, and welcome to this special episode of Crushing Land. Myself and Ginis here with you guys today, along with a bunch of guests here that are watching with us on Zoom. If you're watching this after the fact on Facebook or YouTube or wherever, this is an indication. Like we've been sending out messages and everything for a couple of weeks now that this was going to be a Zoom only event, and that's kind of the way it's going to be moving forward. Just a little bit more intimate, a little bit more. Obviously, we're able to be all together this way. So make sure you look for those notifications moving forward for these type of events because live it will be only on Zoom. So we're gonna jump in here today. We're gonna talk about 2025. Hard to believe we're only 2 weeks away. It seems like we were just talking about 20. Seems like we were just talking about the turn of the century. But it seems like we like just recently we're talking about the same thing for what we thought for 2024. And one of the things I will say about that, Genus, is when we did this for 2024, a lot of what we kind of predicted was what took place. The trends that we
Yeah.
saw and different things coming. We kind of like we're telling you, and it's kind of funny because we've had a couple of students that have reached out and been like, "Oh yeah, I made some adjustments based on those things," and it really, it helped them. So hopefully the same's true here. I mean, obviously these are just our outlooks. They're just predictions based on we both of us have been in real estate for about 20 years and gone through different cycles. I was a house investor and dealing with investors in 2008 during probably the biggest one that we've had in recent memory, the biggest change. So it's just based on, history and what we've seen. But obviously there's no guarantees. I mean, things can change on a dime. There could be, a major disaster. There could be a war. There's a lot of different things that can change things that we just don't know about. But overall, though, I mean, if everything sticks to the trends, it's pretty good, and hopefully it can help you guys with making some decisions. So let's jump in. Outlook on 2025. You have any thoughts you want to start with on that?
Yeah, I mean, 2024 was one of those, as I say, like happens every few years, right? Like whenever there's that election, everybody kind of tightens up a little bit, I believe. And then as it gets near the election and we start to just see who's gonna become president from which party, that kind of uh, helps and sometimes takes a toll on the real estate market a little bit. Again, I'm not a very political person, as you guys know, as everybody knows. I don't really care too much about it. Doesn't really affect me personally more than like my local representatives that really affect the area and communities and stuff that I live in. So I focus a lot more on that than the actual president and all of that stuff. I know it's all important, but that's just my opinion of it. But no, like this year it was not far off from last year for me as far as like deal wise, as far as like financials. I did take a little bit like longer lazy break, as I say, than I normally do. But as far as numbers and things like that, I didn't see too much of a difference. It was a slight downtick, but I wouldn't say it was very dramatic as I thought it could be. But I will say that there were parts of this year that were a lot longer where I didn't make sales than there was at any other year, probably in the last 10 years. So there was some differences, but not too much. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and I think a lot of that had to do. We talked about that with the shift in the economy. You're kind of stuck between markets at that point. And we talked about that,
yeah,
oh, man, probably 2 years ago now. We said that was going to come.
yeah,
Where sellers are, I gave an example last night on our group coaching call of somebody that was telling me, like, I think I said 2023. It was actually 2022, but he was basically telling me, well, I got offered this in 2022. And I like literally told the guy, I'm like, we do not live in the same world that we lived in 2022. Right. It's like, so sellers still had or have, a little higher expectation, whereas buyers are definitely tightening up. They're not, before it was like you just threw it out there and it was gone. I mean, we were selling properties in the same day, right? Multiple offers in some cases, people coming in. And that was across all
yeah.
sectors. That wasn't just, I mean, people were doing that in land, they were doing it in houses, everything that was going on. So we're definitely, seeing that tighten up. And the election definitely has a play with that. I mean, my outlook and my guess on that, honestly, is we expected after with the results of the election and based on what that again, not playing politics and not being involved, like Gina said, but just the way the election went, and on who won, that's obviously was an economy play, right? And so we kind of envisioned that the economy would jump right after the announcement, which is what happened. We saw that in a lot of areas. I mean, the stock market jumped.
Stock
uh,
market, yeah.
yeah, stocks jumped, housing jumped, real estate jumped a little bit. Precious metal jumped. It was, and then they went back down. There was a couple different things, but I don't anticipate that lasting, especially after the inauguration. I think it could come back, but I do think that there's going to be a little bit of, gamesmanship on both sides. There's going to be there's always is, right? And it's going to mess around with things. And so I don't anticipate that steady. I think it's going to be a little bit
Rise,
more,
yeah.
and I know people are saying that. I mean, like, even like, I know there's people I know that are investors in like silver, and they've been saying like they're waiting. They're not buying right now. They're there because they anticipate that right around that time it's going to drop, and that's when they want to do some buying, and then it'll go back up after that. And that's just, so again, across all sectors, I'm kind of seeing that. One thing I will say to what Jesus was talking about, is, and he can comment on this too, is a shift in seller motivation. I'm seeing them higher motivated now than they were just a few months ago. Like, they're coming more to reality of what some aren't, but more are in reality and in line with where the market really is. People aren't, some of them are still asking these ridiculous prices, like I talked about that example, but a lot of them are just like, yeah, well, I'm seeing it happening. I'm seeing, I don't want to get stuck with it. I'm hearing words like that a lot more, which we heard a number of years ago. So it seems like sellers in reality, their perception, their reality of the situation is coming around a lot more. And based on that, that obviously is going to keep going. That's going to get better for us as buyers in 2025. But it also does put some emphasis on us, right? We have to be better at communication. We have to be better at
Yep.
giving them information, different things like that, because we got to keep,
And
it's
also just
not
like
just
bringing
like,
them back.
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, even also like just bringing them back down to reality when they do want that ridiculous price. It's like, and it's not worth it. It's okay to let them know whether you get the deal or not. I mean, that's kind of what I do. And, and I've had people tell me, man, I should have took that offer that I got 2 years ago when the market was ridiculously hot. Now I'm getting offers for less than half of that. It's like, because that's where the market is today. Unfortunately, we go based on what has sold, not what you think it's worth, right? And I try to tell a lot of my students that all the time. It's like, it don't matter what they are asking for. If it's just simply not worth it, you have to go based on what you see today, right? Even 12 months ago and today is different as far as the market. So you just have to go based on what you see recently versus, what somebody says or believe it's worth. And the problem with a lot of newer investors that are just getting into the business or just starting to go through all this is they're trying to get a deal so bad that they're trying to basically figure out a way to get close to that number even when everything is showing you that it's nowhere, like you can't get close to that number. It's okay to still make an offer based on what you see in your numbers, not trying to reach their number if you can't reach it.
Yeah. And I think part of it is also, you talked about this again a little bit last night on our group call. And one of the things that, when we talked about being informative, communicating well, is tell sellers that, but like do it in a way that's like positive for them. So like, I forgot what the example was you did last night, some $20,000 something. Somebody said, I got offered $20,000, and your response was, well, you should go back to that person and take that then.
Exactly. I mean,
Let them know, because what's going to happen in every case. I shouldn't even say, I was going to say 9 times out of 10. Well, in 9 times out of 10, the person's not even going to, they're going to say the offer is no good anymore. 1 time out of 10, it's going to be a moron that, yes, they're going to sign the papers, but they're going to cancel the contract anyway because they can't sell the property for a discount, for a profit. So, or they're going to be negotiating back and forth. So the property's never going to sell for that because it's not worth it. But 9 times out of 10, the person's not going to sign it anyway. But what's going to happen in those cases? That person is going to come back to you a lot of times, right? Because you were the one that was honest with them. You were upfront. you had the conversation, you told them go ahead and try it, as opposed to like you could sit there and say the same exact thing in different words. Oh, it'll never sell for that. Those people are out of their minds. It's not, no, because now it's a negative. Well, oh, if they offered you that,
Yeah.
you should go take that. That's a great deal. It ain't going to happen. And then all of a sudden they come back to you because it's either that or they're going to go try to market it or they're just going to forget about it. I mean, but if they're seriously interested, they're going to come back to you. And that's experience talking. I'm not putting this out there as like this hypothetical. I know people like to do that. They'll be like, well, who was the last one? And no, we've seen it. We know it happened because it's happened before. It's happened where, and it happens in the sector of offers. It also happens real estate agents. We've had it where people have, like, a real estate agent tells somebody, your property's worth this, and we'll be like, well, then you should list it with them if they can get you that. Because, and then they come back and they're like, yeah, they didn't do anything. The thing sat there for 6 months and I didn't get a single person interested in this. Are you still interested? We've had those situations happen numerous times. So sometimes just, like I said, communication, information, it's good for you, so educate yourself and then you can help them to do better. And then obviously you can
Well,
do a couple different things. You could either just wait and let them come back to you, or obviously you can check back in. It doesn't hurt you to send them some sort of communication in 6 months. If it's sold, who cares? It's sold. They tell you it's sold. If it didn't sell, then you're ready to
exactly.
do something at that point.
I agree. I agree. I think it's big to try to educate and be straight up with people, because that does reciprocate in a way where it's like, okay, believe it or not, people will reach back out to you. People will say, "Hey, man, I remember that conversation we had, and you were 100% right. I tried it with this other person, it didn't sell. I'm reaching back out to you because you seem like you were straightforward, you were honest, and I'd rather do business with someone like you or a company like you than a lot of these other letters I'm getting or blind offers I'm receiving or people telling me I'm out of my mind for what I'm asking." So I think that's huge, man, because even if you don't get the deal, at the very least you're educating them, letting them know what you're seeing on the market. So when they get something else, at least they're more open to that price point, or saying, okay, well, this is probably all I'm going to get, and then kind of decide from there.
Yeah, and the other thing it does is obviously it keeps them happy and they may refer you, which I mean, we don't have a huge referral business, but it just popped into my mind because it literally happened yesterday to me. Some lady reached out and said, "Hey, my son got some contact from you. He's not interested in selling his property, but he appreciated what you said. You went back and forth, and he was like, I'd be interested in talking about mine." So that does happen too. Obviously, you're keeping doors open and you're keeping a positive experience for them. So that is something that you can do.
It's not always about getting the deal and making money. And I mean, yeah, that's what we're in the business of, but we're also in the business of trying to help people, at the end of the day. Even if that means you have no benefit from helping someone else, it will, I believe in karma, and it'll come back and,
Yeah, it's
and
funny. I'm actually going to
reciprocate.
do, because the people that follow me on Facebook, I do like book reviews for business and stuff like that. And I'm actually going to be doing a book that I just finished. And it's funny because the book itself is good, but it probably has maybe the best chapter that I've ever. I actually went back and listened to it twice because it was so good, on basically that. And it's all about like ethical failing and like and sliding and how people do that all the time, and how it's not against the law, it's not breaking the rules, but is it ethical? And he talked about numerous, Simon Sinek, he talked about numerous um examples out there of major companies that do it, and then like what it led to and different things like that, and as opposed to other companies that went the other way and like what their reputation is because of it, and things like that, and what helps you sleep better at night and all that. So if you're following me like personally on Facebook, if not you can, but if not, if you are, you'll see that probably today or tomorrow. I'll put out a review on the. But it was, even if you don't go read the book, go read that chapter. It'll be in there, all the details on it, because that one alone was incredible to Ginis's point. And I think, I mean, that's just one of the ways that we do business in general. We don't try to like undercut people. We don't try to. I mean, obviously, we're trying to buy at a discount. We've got to, that's not undercutting because we're just buying at a discounted price, right? But when anything that we're dealing with, we're not trying to like hurt people We're not trying to make ourselves, win for us at anybody else's expense and things like that. And if you have that reputation across the board, you're just going to do way better off because what comes around goes around. I mean, it's just the way it works, right? So,
Yeah, I agree. And kind of going into that, as far as like, I think we're going to see a lot more of, or we have to continue to do a lot more of the follow up going into 2025, like we really, really hit on in 2024. And I think that's mine and Jonathan's plan is, continue with the letters, obviously, continue with the ringless voicemails as well as the SMS, and kind of combining those to really maximize that response rate and that true offer rate, right? Because a lot of people go off of response rate. We go more off of like true response rate, right? Which is like, and what we mean by true response is like, okay, out of all these people that are responding, like how much, what's the actual percentage that we're actually sending an offer to, right? Before it was like you send an offer to everybody. But nowadays, I mean, you get responses of some people that are like, hey, take me off the list, or I'm not interested in selling. I mean, it's been far less than it used to be, but I'm more focused on, hey, I'm getting a 2.5% true response rate versus I'm getting a 2.5% response rate, right? The difference is you're getting 2.5% of the people that actually just call you, whether they're interested and not in an offer. True response rate is 2.5% of people that I'm actually sending offers to. That's basically what we go
yeah.
by, and I
You
think
said
we're
you
going to
said
have to
the term
continue
twice,
to
so you meant response rate, true response rate as opposed to overall response rate.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
you said
meant.
true twice.
Sorry.
So yeah, just yeah. So and for example on that, I mean, one of the things that you'll probably see is maybe people that do like SMS, they'll be like, we have a 25% response rate. Yeah, okay. So 1 in 4 person response. But out of those 1 in 4, 3 out of 4 are saying, I'm not interested. Thanks. They're not mean, but they're just saying, I'm not interested in selling because they don't want you to keep texting. So I'm not in, that's not a response. It is, but it's not, it's nothing you're going anywhere with, right? And that's going to, no, now with letters, it doesn't happen as much, right? Because you send them. So with letters, it's much more in line, those two numbers because you send them a letter and it says like, well, if you're interested, call here or email or whatever, your call to action. A few will call and say, I'm not interested, but most people just throw it away if they're not interested. Whereas if you're calling people, if it's cold calling, if you're, leaving a voicemail with them, if you're texting them, if you're doing any of those things, those people may not want to keep getting, they think, oh, I'm going to get another one. I don't want it. So they actually do respond saying that they're not interested and like Gina said, very few are mean. We've lost that's not out there like it used to be. So that's come down. There's probably, I mean, one a week or so. It's a very low number, for us.
Yeah.
But there are numerous people that just say, I'm not interested, or I'm using the property, I plan to build on it, whatever it may be, and they just don't want you to keep. They're like, well, I don't want to get a call from this guy in 3 days again asking me about it. So they respond in those cases. So those numbers, because of that, are inflated way up here. And some people will say, oh, we're getting 25%. Yeah, okay, you are, but you can't do anything with those leads. So if they're useless leads, don't get swayed by that information. And to what Genus was just talking about, that is one thing that I will put out there for 2025 that we've already done, but I know a lot of people are hesitant with it, and I'm gonna throw it out there as like a huge thing to help you. And this isn't for 2025. This is like from this point on
Forward. Yeah.
for moving forward is embracing tools, both AI and automation. If you're not using them, don't get me wrong. If you want to do just the small little dinky investing side hustle where you're sending out a handful of letters and you're doing, yeah, that can still work. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but it isn't gonna. You ain't gonna create a business with that in the current ever moving forward. It's done. So embrace
It's
those.
just it's just like the other day, Jonathan. I was talking with a student, just helping her out, and we were on a phone call. I got jumped on Zoom with her to help her out, and she's on a limited budget. And my thing is, if you're on a limited budget, you probably should be texting versus sending out direct mail, just because you can reach a lot more people for a lot less money. And we kind of went over the whole thing. I'm like, okay, so what are you doing? She's like, well, I'm using Pebble right now under like single plan or whatever. It's like 100, $150 a month. And that's how she's sending mail because that's what she could afford. She doesn't have to send 500 or 1,000 letters at once through Pebble. She can send 50 or 200 or 100, whatever you want. It costs more money per letter, per piece, but she can do it at her pace just to continue to get mail out at her budget, which makes sense. So like I explained to her, hey, we have our CRM that you're going to be able to text, you're going to be able to do everything. So let's run the numbers, right? She said she sent out like 200 postcards or something like that. It was like postcards too on top of that, which is not the best, as far as sending out mail. Postcards are not the best. And I think she spent like $150 on 200 and something postcards. And I'm like, well, just think about how many text messages that could have been. You could have probably reached 4,000, 5,000 people in the same amount of, with the same amount of money that you just spent taking that up. Now, that doesn't include the CRM portion of it, but it does include just what you just spent to send out 240 postcards. You could have probably reached several thousand people.
Yeah. Well, she had the
It's a
CRM
big
part on the other
difference.
side anyway because of Pebble. So either way, she has the pay to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, either way, she had the CRM cost. And I mean, and that's
Yeah,
something
well,
to look
exactly.
at, right, everybody? That is something to look at because people all the time are like, well, I don't want to add this extra cost. But there's tons of times where adding an extra cost actually saves you money in the long run. It's like because you put this in and it's a tool that does something that actually gets you better leads or something like that, or saves you hours of time. We talk about like mail houses and things like that. So, embrace that kind of stuff. Definitely moving forward, it's not going away. I mean, and that's the key. And the other thing that I would say is it was funny. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Is so many people, instead of trying to figure out the best way to handle a situation, something comes up and maybe there's like it's sticky. And SMS was a perfect example of that because SMS kind of was like free for all, do whatever you want. Then it got like super regulated, and then like a couple of the main carriers that did stuff like it either like nothing was working or they hiked up their prices through the roof in order to like let you use it. And then it kind of settled back down. But in the meantime, everybody freaked out and said, okay, well, that's not the way to go. Now you got to go to X. And if you kind of stay the game, it's kind of funny because now we're watching it and we're doing SMS and we're getting great results, better than we've ever gotten because it's a lot less people are doing it. And it's funny because like I've seen that across the board because I own properties. I own a house. I own, that's for sale. I own land. The marketing that I'm getting has dropped. I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday, former student that's running a huge business now, a huge land investing business. I was chatting with him and he was saying like he's seeing it across the board too. He's like, we own numerous properties because they might own or finance them, whatever, they stay in their name. And he's like, we were getting blind offers, letters, texts, calls all the time on this stuff. And it's just tanking down. So people like have no clue where to turn right now. Like they're freaking out
Yeah.
because the market shifted and they're just running away instead of adjusting and learning it. And part of that is, not embracing technology, not embracing these tools, that type of thing. And then the other part of it is that so many people, and nothing wrong with this, but so many people jumped in COVID. I call them COVID investors. So they basically jumped in, they had free time. And it's like, if you look at a lot of like, now I'm not just talking about land, if you just look at a lot of education programs out there for real estate, I started in 2020, I started in 2021 because they had the time. And again, nothing wrong with that, but the model of what they were doing doesn't work anymore. What you're targeting doesn't, and that's why that stuff is sliding off. I mean, you could, in COVID, it was like basically just, I feel like you could have sent out a blank piece of paper with a phone number and people would call you. It was like without ever, it was just so crazy how that's not there. And I don't really ever anticipate that type of market coming back again. That was a very weird set of circumstances that was happening with an economy doing well, everybody staying home, interest rates were like bargain basement
Rock
prices,
bottom. Yeah.
2%. I mean, nut stuff, right? It's like
But
so.
it was like more also like you also felt like everything was about to go down again like 2008, right? And then it just did the exact opposite, right? And like everything went through the roof value wise and everything went up when everybody thought, as soon as COVID hit, everybody panicked and was like, okay, we're about to have a 2008 recession again, right? And then it just didn't happen. Everything just kind of went up because nothing was really bad market wise. It was just, everything that kind of happened at that moment that, because I know I was getting calls left and right from a lot of the clients. Because remember, I was working with a lot of clients at the time, but right before COVID or right when COVID came out, and a lot of the clients were like just panicking about the business side of real estate, and it really didn't affect anything. It actually went up through the roof a lot, and yeah, now we're kind of back to like pre-pandemic real estate investing, right? Which is like normal. And to a lot of people, it's not normal the way the market has been this year. But for someone like myself and Jonathan that's been doing this for years, it's like was more of a normal market where it's taken several months to sell lots most of the time. I mean, you still get people that'll buy, you still got lots that you're going to sell in a day, in a week, within a few weeks. But on average, it's taken, several months to sell a lot versus, during the COVID market, 1 day, 5 days, 10 days, they're most of them are selling. So
And that's honestly true in every market. I mean, we put properties out in 2008, 2009 and sold them in a day or two because they were priced to do that, right? But I remember like in 2008, for example, we bought a house. It was just a little house. It was like a 3-1 or maybe even 2-1, I don't know. But we bought it for $25,000 in Florida. The house is worth a few hundred thousand. It's like, but we only sold it for like 50 grand. So we just did it quick.
yeah.
And that's why it sold like that. I mean, so if you price it right, so even then things would have moved. That's probably one we should have hung on to and rented, right? But the problem was nobody was renting either back then. I mean, so you would have just been sitting on it. But
Well, just go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Finish.
But my point is like, so you got to embrace like a little bit of change and stuff. And I've seen people that during this, and don't, I just want to be very clear, don't do this, especially right now. Don't, I mean, is they were offering like 70% of value, being like, oh, I'm going to sell it like you no, because you might be selling it for 80. And yeah, if the property's worth $1 million and you're offering 700,000, okay, because you can make 100,000. But if it's worth 10,000 and you're offering 7 and you're going to sell it for 9, if you're fortunate,
you ain't making no money.
you're not making anything, by the time closing costs and things like that. So that model is out the window, except for very few, like the example I just gave, super high end, very hot moving communities. If you have one, you might have stuff that everything in there selling for 100 grand, right? Okay, well then you might go in and you might say, well, I don't mind offering 70 and flipping it somebody quick because they're moving, but you gotta really know that area and that situation to do that, because across the board, that's definitely not true anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely agree. So as far as what else is trending for 25, Jonathan?
Well,
I'm
I
trying
would
to think
say
of.
one thing that I've noticed, and I think I'm gonna put like a little caveat on this because I know you're kind of going a different direction with it, but we're talking about two different things, even though we're kind of saying the same thing, is that there's less interest in building. There's excessive home demand out there and higher building costs, and that's putting less interest in building. Now, what I mean by that is the builder, like the typical spec guy or something like that. We were selling lots left and right to those type of builders. Um, so those aren't, oh, I've got extra. I'm not really buying them. I'm sitting on some lots right now. We're hearing a lot more of that. So that interest where like you could just flip a lot really quickly to a builder and they were kind of sitting on them, and that is definitely gone down.
Well,
There are,
I think a lot of those little small builders now are like building on people that already own land. They're not really buying land no
yeah,
more
custom
like they
homes.
used to. Yeah, yeah. Now they're like, hey, well, because I got a good buddy locally that does that. But like I told him, like, hey, I got land when I had land in the area. I'm like, yo, I got some land. He's like, yeah, we're not buying right now. We're only building if the customer already has the land. And I'm like, well, oh, okay. So it's just a little different. I think that was happening this year a little bit. I do see that going into 25 as well, especially with some of these smaller builders. But the bigger ones, I mean, the building overall, everything that I've read and researched on is projected to do over well, like 1.1 million new builds. Um, I'm sure the majority of them are going to be some of the bigger players, the Lennars, the KBs, the players like that that have the unlimited funds. I mean, I got a buddy that works for a builder, and I know this kind of talk we talked a little bit about yesterday. I got a buddy that's that works for a big builder, um, in they're in multiple states, obviously they're nationwide, and I think they're in 13 areas right now, heavily, like 13 different states, real heavily. And I mean, I think they said they made like $6 billion last year, and like out of that overall, like half of it was profit. So they're like, yo, whatever you get in this box, as far as acreage, as far as if we can do this, if we can do that, like we're paying whatever because we know we're going to make a ton of money off of it. So that's kind of where I'm doubling down on next year is finding these lots and these specific sites. So I'm doing something to try something totally different. I'm going to still do everything else I do, but I'm adding something else because, like I told my wife, if we could just do one or two of these a year with these big builders, I mean, we can pay 80%, 90%, and make 10, 15% of $2 million, $3 million. That's $10 million. You make 5% of that. It's like, oh, you're good. All you need is two of those a year and one or two of those a year, and you can just sit back and relax. So that's the play. We'll see
Yeah,
how it
I
works out.
mean, just to put a little perspective on that, from what I was saying and what he's saying. So I've got a buddy that's a real estate broker. He's also a builder, and I was chatting with him, and he basically was talking about this area that he works in, and DR Horton was in there, and they're doing 3 subdivisions. They're dropping in 600 new homes. He basically said nobody else was building there because they can't compete. So those
Yep.
selling lots to the individual builders, like what I was talking about, gone because they basically took over the market. And I was talking about those properties, and basically they're selling. These are like kind of entry level homes. Entry level is $400,000, but entry level nowadays, entry level homes. But they only cost them like $150,000, $180,000 depending on to build because they go in and they blast them out. So he knew all the
Yep.
numbers, and the normal builder cannot do that, right? They can't because they can't buy. These guys are buying millions upon millions upon millions of dollars of land and supplies to get them cheaper so that they can go do this. Your average builder can't do that. He can't go down to like Home Depot and negotiate with them or wherever, or lumberyard, and say
Yeah.
he can get a builder's price, but it's going to be a little bit of a discount. It ain't going to be. These guys
Huge
control
discount.
like
Yeah.
the supply chain. So it's a totally different world. So yes, building is still going to continue, but and it always
Now I
has. Even in
think
2008, building continued. Obviously, it slowed in certain areas, but other areas it boomed. It was like, but it's who's doing the building now, right? It's opposed to
Yeah, well, and that's exactly it. And some these bigger players, they're also not looking for an acre, a quarter acre, 2 acres, or let me get 5 acres and subdivide. No, they're looking for 30, 40, 50 acres, right? Which again becomes harder to get. In addition to that, you have to make sure if you get that kind of acreage that it's mostly buildable, that there's a lot that goes into it, which takes a lot of time and all of that good stuff, having it rezoned and putting out notices and having the meetings and going through like it's a pain in the butt. But again, one or two of those deals, and you're good for the rest of the year, pretty
yeah.
much, right?
And those guys are going in. I mean,
Literally,
they're putting in roads, they're putting in utilities. I mean, they're doing everything, but they have the team to
yes,
do it. And again,
yes,
average price for
for cheap. They have the team to do it for cheap.
because if you wanted to go put in a road, if I want to go put in a road, $1 million a mile roughly is what it costs. $1 million a
Yeah,
mile, so they're not paying that. They've got the stuff in place to do that. So that's why you got to look at if I know that you may be looking at this and being like, I see a ton of building going on, right? So I know I can still
yeah.
flip to builders. Well, you need to see who's doing the building, right? And I'm not saying
Mhm.
that this is countrywide, right? Obviously, there's going to be pockets, there always are, where mom and pop builders are still buying lots, they're still putting up spec homes. That's always going to be the case, right? There's going to be something there. There's going to be areas where that's all that exists because major players don't go in because the population doesn't warrant it. So, but overall, we're just talking about for 2025 and what we've already seen in 2024. is that the average builder that's just out there that maybe wants to take on a few projects, wants to, build a spec, wants to flip it, whatever it is, does a handful of them, not the guy that's going out and dropping in a few hundred homes, the guy that's handling only, a couple up to, maybe even a couple dozen, small team, that type of thing. That buyer has, in generally speaking, dried up at this point because they are just not, unless you give them a steal of a deal on a piece of property they can just sit on.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
That being said, too, the other thing that I've noticed is because of that, and this is something that we've pretty much always done because we like this sector, but definitely more rural land in stronger demand than the city lots again. The city lots were in strong demand when people were building. Now that building is slowing down, unless you're getting that very specific buyer that wants to build a house there, which obviously they exist. But unless you're getting that person now, the shift is definitely more rural. And we've always liked those lots more anyway, because it just
Yeah.
appeals to more different, many more buyers.
And you
People
can
are
do a
like,
little
oh,
bit
more people
more with
want
a
to
lot
live
of
in the
those
city than in the
lots.
country. And it's like, that's not true for one. And two, a lot of different uses in there. The city is very regulated where it's like you can only do X, Y, and Z, whereas, it might even be X, Y, and Z. It might just be you can only do X, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the rural, it's like, well, you can put up a house, you could put up a mobile home, you could put up a container home, you can put in multifamily, you could put in, storage units if you want. If you could just leave it, you can use it for rec land, all of these different things. And so, yeah, the rural land is definitely we've seen
So
stronger demand for that again.
now that we're on this topic, I mean, how do you think like the new president coming in and talking about the tariffs is could affect obviously the building and things of that nature? What are your predictions on that? I know you touched on this a little bit. I don't know if it was me and you having a conversation or
I
we
think
were
it
on
was on
somewhere.
I think it was on one of our question and answers. So personally, to me, just reading what I've read on like the economy and all that, I don't I know what they're saying. I don't think that that's actually going to happen. I don't think the
I
tariff.
just saw recently, you didn't, I don't know if you saw recently, Canada's like their prime minister, the big guy over there, the president basically
There
over
you
there,
go.
was basically saying that we're prepared to stop electricity going to the US if those tariffs kick in. Like they're prepared. He said we don't want to do it, but we're fully prepared and capable of stopping the electricity to go to the US because I guess they supply us with a lot of electricity or something,
Yeah, there's like, I
which
mean,
I didn't
I only
know.
live like 20 miles from there, and there's like power lines run the whole way. I mean, I don't know what they're for, but I mean,
Yeah,
I
I'm
honestly
assuming
don't.
that's what he's talking
That's why I
about.
don't think it's going to happen. I personally looking at like, just reading different things on like economic reviews, and this is like both sides, political parties. This is not like, just one sided saying, even the his party is saying this where they don't believe it's actually going to get through because of that. Where I do think it could happen is more, and I've seen this and they talked about it, is devaluing the dollar, making the United States dollar more competitive. And if you devalue, it's basically accomplishing the same thing, but then it's creating stuff here because why leave at that point? The whole reason that people don't run to China because it's a better product, right? It's because
Yeah,
it's 10 cents on the
cheaper
dollar.
price.
So if you make the American dollar, if you devalue it, obviously some of it's still going to be made over there because American standards are higher. There's no way around that. But for certain things, it's going to obviously build up industry here, and that's where I've seen a lot of people say, I can see where they'll devalue the dollar, and in that case, I mean, maybe it'll be a combination of both. I don't know. I mean, like for example, Canada and America, the dollar is not. I mean, it's different. Don't worry, the American dollar is stronger than the Canadian, but it's not like insanely different. It's not like it's 500 to 1 type of thing. It's just a small percentage. So if you devalue it a little bit, that could obviously offset things where getting lumber. Canada's huge for lumber. That's the biggest thing from Canada, right? That's where the lumber comes from for building and stuff. So getting lumber, you mentioned electric, things like that, that might balance that out. And then maybe they do tariffs with something like China, which it doesn't matter as much because that's more consumer goods, and maybe that balances it. So it might be a combination of both, but I personally don't. I don't think it's going to be enough to the whole. And again, not political or not, but the whole premise of this whole policy and agenda moving forward and all of that was basically the economy, right? I mean, that's where so it's going to be what can be done to stabilize it and work. And I think that whole team is going to work on that more than trying to figure out how to like just suck money out of another country and kill everything in the process. That, I mean, again,
Gotcha.
that's just from reading and guesses and stuff. But I mean, that's I have no inside knowledge there, so my guess is just as good as yours. It just seems counterintuitive to do things that's gonna
Yeah,
kill your own economy just to punish somebody else, you know?
I agree. I agree 100%. Um, so yeah, I mean, as far as
Well, let's just
out,
talk for a minute on uh like goals. Like what are your or focus or what like for like because I think that's one of the things that we talk about a lot is what do we do what do I guess it's more like I'm trying to think of the best wording here. Like we're not just educators, right? We actually live this. So for those of you who don't know, I mean, Genus and I own, the land method, the education side together. We own some property together, but for 99% of our business, we are independent real estate investors. He owns his own company with his wife. I own my own company with my wife. We do different things, family owned, things like that. So yeah, we've gotten involved a couple times together, but for the most part, so we work in different areas. We don't compete with each
yeah,
other, right? We use a little bit different strategies for anybody that's been involved with any of our programs. You've heard us talk about that, like, little different nuances. Overall, we're following like you say, I go this way, you go this way, and we both come to here. So,
we all end up at the end of the
yeah.
day, we end up in the same situation
So,
most of the time.
so everybody hearing that, I mean, just so that they understand who you're, because I think, they see me more because I'm usually the ones in the video and stuff, but we're both, we both do the education, but we both are active investors, and that's our primary thing. So, and maybe based on that, like what we're going to be talking about here is different. We haven't actually talked about this together. So what we're going to
Yeah.
talk about here could be different because we have different goals, different objectives. So for 2025, I mean, you already talked about one with the larger things and the builders and stuff, but what are you looking at for yourself?
As far as like what? As far as just different
Your land
things that I'm
investing business,
doing.
like what goals do you have? Like what are you going to focus on? Like what do you want to accomplish for the upcoming
Oh,
year?
yeah, I'm focusing again. One of my biggest things is focusing on some of these much bigger deals. I mean, like I said, we're doing more like in like the center of the country, which I have never done business in. I'm always been on the East Coast, mainly in 3 to 4 states. I've done them in multiple states, but now we're going to focus more like center of the country because I have this connection that we're going to see how it works out. But I mean, my goal honestly is not to pump out a bunch of deals this year. My goal is to focus on some larger deals, maybe do a little bit more entitlements and things like that as well, just because it seems like it's much more it's more work, but it's also a much better profit. So, if I were to do a lot less deals at double the profit that I'm making last year, then it's going to equal out at the end of the day. I remember my goal is to not work 20, 30, 40 hours a week into the investing business. I mean, I just don't want to do it. And I don't have the time to do that with my daughter getting ready to go to college. Still got 2 more years. After that, then I'm gonna have all the free time in the world. But until then, it's like, I stay busy every single day with that, which is my number one priority is her.
Well, you don't want
Um,
to anyway. I mean, even after she's gone. I mean, I don't have kids at home. I mean, I don't have kids, but I don't. We don't want that. I mean, we enjoy like other things, and it's like don't get me wrong. I mean, you want to make good money and you want to but just pumping it on all the time just to keep dollars flowing in is not happiness, right?
Well,
So
and that's something we found out what in 2019, 2020. I mean, we were doing a ton of deals, making killer money, and it's like, yeah, it's great, but when you're working all those hours and doing all that extra stuff, and you're not able to do some of the things you want to do, that's not the lifestyle. And that's why I completely shifted and focused more on, hey, I'm okay with making X amount of money per year because I know how my lifestyle is, which is not very extravagant. So for us, it's like, hey, we make this, we're good as long as I'd rather have time than money. Obviously, we need money to pay bills and do everything else, but money is what makes your day to day easier, but also time is what allows you to do the things that you want. And, when you got kids and, when you got family and, there's things going on in life, time is something you can't get back. So for me, that's a lot more important than the dollars that
Yeah,
I
I
make.
agree. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, not like we're sitting here saying live paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's not the goal either. We don't want to be sitting there sweating it
No.
out. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's like, some of these guys, they're out there trying to build these like basically land empires or real estate empires and stuff like that. And it's like, I feel like all they do is hop from one thing. It's so funny. I, and this isn't this isn't at any individual person but you would just see this across the board. It's something that I've noticed is, and Genus and I have lived this lifestyle, and now we don't. It's funny, like all of these guys, like all said, like, well, I was in corporate America, or I was in this life, and I didn't get the life I lived. I was never at home. I was always away from my family. I was always working. I was always this. And then they're like, but then I started real estate investing, and what do they do now? They're always on a plane. They're always going to some event. They're always like going to check on some product. They're always. It's like you've done the all you did was take the person that you work for out of the equation, but you're still doing the exact
Yeah.
same stuff. And it's like that's not what I want to do with my life. I don't want to be away from home. It's like I don't want to like be forced into those type of things. And so you can still make a very good living and obviously enjoy yourself and things like, but like you said, have the time. So with that in mind, I mean, for me, yeah, I think one of, for my general properties and stuff, still sticking with the rural investments. And definitely focusing on that because the rural stuff just has worked better. And obviously that makes up the vast majority of the country, right? The vast majority of the country lives in rural America. In fact, if you need any help with that, I mean, we talked about the election because they talked about how rural America is what made the difference. So just go look at like the little map, and you can see based on like even states that were you know heavily that Harris took. They kind of talked about like the rural parts and how much they shifted. So I'm not saying to look at it from a political standpoint. Look at it from like where people live standpoint. You could start seeing like a state like New York. It's like it's a lot of red because it's rural. Pennsylvania, a lot of red because it's rural. California, the whole edge. So states like that. So there's a lot. Most of the country is rural America, and so that's a good place that you can that we're focusing on investing in. The other thing that we are definitely going to have an uptick in again, which is fine. We had it before; it kind of went away, and it's coming back. Is owner financing? Sellers are definitely
Yeah.
asking for more owner financing than they did. You know, it was all cash. Just a couple years ago. I mean, it was hard. I think I sold like last year. I think I sold two properties or something on owner finance. It was like next to nothing. Where they used to be like 50-50.
Yeah.
So there's a huge swing where people are asking for more owner financing now, which obviously means you got to be getting the properties at the right price. Because if somebody's wanting to owner finance a $20,000 piece of property and they're giving you a few $1,000s down, you can't be paying $12, $13, $14,000 for it unless you want to be in the red for half of the term, right? So that
Yeah.
you've got to have that balance out. And then to your point and what you're doing, I'm a little bit different, but with my strategy on it. But as opposed to finding these properties for others that are larger, I'm looking at them more for myself um, and subdividing because that's probably my favorite thing to do. And the way I've kind of always treated the subdividing is as I target an area, if I identify a property that fits, then we'll approach it and in our normal marketing. Whereas now I'm going to start being more honed in with my
Yes.
criteria for certain sizes and road frontage and things like that for properties that fit that. That way I can go and attack those, and I'm going to create basically my own, inside of our CRM, because you can have different automations. I'll create a specific one for subdivisions, because obviously the difference in a property like that, and we're not going to get to this long, but what Genus was talking about, what I'm talking about is when you're dealing with those type of properties that are going to be, you're adding value, substantial value, you don't have to go in and fight for a discount on a property like that, right? The person wants $100,000 for the property as it sits. Well, you can, if you know it's going to work, you can put it under contract for 100,000 because it's going to be worth $500,000 when you're done, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So you have more options when it comes to that to not have to sit there and figure in the profits already built in based on the way you're handling that. So I'm not looking to go crazy with that. I was talking to somebody yesterday, again, one of my former students that's really started pushing this himself, and he's been doing this for a number of years. And he told me that he was looking at I think he said one a quarter. So he wants to do 4 a year. I'm not that aggressive. I was thinking two, so one and a half, two for the year is what I'm going to push on. And for me, a subdivision doesn't have to be huge. We've done them 5 lots. We've done them, 20, 30 lots. I mean, we've done different things. So we don't need to go. I'm not looking at from like necessarily what you were talking about with like one of the major builders that's probably going to want to put in hundreds of homes.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's
Now,
like 35 acre minimum or something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah. I
25 or
don't need
35.
that. I mean, so, because I'm going to do it myself. And it's basically what fits, what I can get cut, get an engineer out there, get a survey out there, figure out what needs to be done in water, sewer, road access. If, I mean, there'll be a road, but like, what's the ramifications with the department, that type of stuff. And focusing on that. But those have always been, the ones that we've done by far the best deals.
Yeah.
And that's, now I just want to focus on me personally. I want to focus on more actually targeting that as opposed to just
Yeah, well,
stumbling on
and
that.
that's kind of what we're doing. We have a few different things that we're doing now. So like even in CRM, like when we upload the list, we're like segmenting that list out more into, okay, look, these are the bigger lots that we can try to do this with. This is what we're going to do like entitlements or subdivisions, like the smaller subdividing. And then these are just regular lots. I mean, we're still mailing everybody, but we're just going to be splitting the list up a little differently to touch those different things that we're looking to do. And also when we're sending out text messages and things like that, and in the CRM, we kind of have it segmented out. So when they reply, it's not like we're trying to figure out who the heck we're talking to, and they're all different. We're going to have them all kind of separated out like that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be buying, like we're going to start buying some more notes. That's something we're going to test next year as well. I already kind of started that a little bit over the last month. So we'll be setting aside some cash to get notes that we feel are going to benefit us because we like mailbox money also, and just kind of sit back and if you can invest X amount to make X amount in a certain amount of years. If it makes sense, it makes sense, right? And if you have a little bit of cash, it's not something that we're going to dive like we're not going to buy 100 notes or nothing like that. But we're probably anywhere in the 3 to 15 range over the next 4 or 5 months and just kind of see how that plays out,
Yeah.
throughout the
And the
year.
nice thing with notes are, I think, and I'm not saying that they had to do this, but I think a lot of people did this with that were owner financing, was they gave such a low percentage on because the interest rates were low. So they were like, oh, I got to
Mhm.
match them. And interest rates are at 2 and 3%. So people were selling land at 4. I'm like, well, the banks still, even when it was as hot as can be, the banks were not lending on vacant land. They were, but like 50% down. So you didn't have to drop down to the level people did. But the problem is that those notes it's like they're not really creating anything for you, right? It's like it's almost all just principal at that point. It's such a small amount that you're getting back. So we're seeing it shift back the other way now where for years, especially in lower end properties, we were, 14, 15% interest and nobody fought it. And they're not now again on those lower end ones. It's like they just look at the number, and we used to say that, right? They just look at the number and they say, "Can I afford that number?" They don't even read the rest of it. I mean, they may, but they really
Mhm.
focus in on the payment. Can I afford that number every month? And if they say yes, then they do it. If not, then they don't. And then you obviously can work with them. So as
I
we're
mean,
moving
also
forward,
with the interest rates being high, it kind of, nobody really looks. I mean, like I got a quote the other day on a DSCR loan, which is like a rental loan for those that don't know. You can get loans with bad credit with, as long as you have a down payment basically, and it goes based on the rental income, the cash flow from the property, you can get loans like that and into your LLC and all of that. So I'm looking at one now that we're getting, and like for like, I mean, it's like 7.6%, 7.3%. I can get all the way down to like 6.8, based on certain things and points and buy downs and all of that stuff. But I mean, that's pretty high, but it's not that high compared to where the actual interest rates are now, which is what, 6.3, 6.5. If you go traditional. So it is always a little bit higher, but not too much higher. But the flexibility that these other companies have is not like just traditional bank. You don't need to show proof of income. You don't need to show bank statements a lot of times or how much money you have. It's just like, hey, we're going based off of this property and the cash flow from that property. I know it's a whole nother, obviously that's something different, not land investing, but it's just kind of to prove the point of
Yeah,
the,
well,
the
and those
interest
loans are
rates.
based off of your like basically they just look at your debt on the property. That's what the D stands for. So it's like basically they're looking at the debt on your property and seeing like if you can cover what the loan is.
Yeah,
So
the debt
that
service coverage ratio.
yeah, so they're focusing on can you cover. So those ones have obviously a little bit more play because they're looking at what's there and what's coming and things like that. But in general, I mean, I had a guy reach out to me. I don't remember last week or the week before, but he basically was like, "I'm going to offer you this, and I'm doing 6%." And I'm like, "I ain't doing it for 6%." And he's like, "Well, I'm not willing to pay more than that." I'm like, "Well, then you don't get the property." I was like, because I'm like, you can't even go get a mortgage for 6%. I was like, you go tell a lender right now I want a mortgage at 6%. Go, you ain't getting it. It's like so, or maybe right at it. Maybe I haven't really looked at it like in recent weeks, but it was kind of hovering around there. But it may have dropped a
Yeah.
little bit below. But at minimum, it's like it's right there. So it's like I'm not. Go tell the bank you want that loan then. Go take out a personal loan or something to buy the property. Go take out a HELOC to buy it from me. I don't care what you do. It's like you ain't
Yeah, I
gonna get
don't.
it for that price.
Yeah, I don't tell people really the interest rate. I just tell them the amount. Hey, how much could you pay? How much could you put down? Well, I can pay
Yeah, and
around
I
this
do
a
the same
month, and then
thing.
if the
He
numbers
came
make
forward to
sense,
me and
hey man,
said,
this is what it is.
"Yeah,
Yeah, I just say, look, once you let me know what you can pay and put down, then I'll let you know what the payments will be and how long the term will be.
yeah." I do the exact same thing. I mean, that's something that we teach. I mean, the difference. This one, it actually came forward. The guy saw the property, and it said owner financing might be available, and he came out and he threw out the numbers at me, like he had already figured it out, and I was like, "No, ain't happening." So
Sorry, buddy, don't work like that.
yeah,
It's my property, not yours.
yeah. So,
um, yeah, I mean,
well, let's
uh,
I think we're good. So, I mean, just so you guys know, I mean, there's kind of our focus. I mean, we kind of went over a lot of different stuff. You don't have to embrace it all. You don't have to embrace any of it, honestly. I mean, it's up to you how far you take it. I see somebody here just said they got their mortgage at 3.9. I mean, yeah, I got mine at 2.2. I mean, but those are gone, you know. So, for now. And I don't 4% might come back. 4%'s like historically 4% is like the number. Like if it hits 4, you're not going to do better. Historically, that's what they claim, right? Now obviously that got proved wrong in COVID. But they basically are like if you can get to 4, you're getting a steal of a deal getting somebody else's money. That's what they claim about mortgages. So when people were getting down to
yeah,
2, half of that, yeah. So I did a refi, I think the year before you. I only bought my house in 2016. I'm sorry, 2019, and I refied the next, which nobody ever does. Nobody refis a year later, right? And I was at 4%, but I refied because it dropped me down to 2. So and it was so funny with the refi. I looked and like, how long will it take me to balance out? Because obviously you lose money in the refi with the closing cost. And it was like
yeah,
6 months, and I was going to break even, which is unheard of. And then it was like, well, if you keep paying the same amount every month, like my old payment, it was like 3 months, and I just did that. So I mean, obviously, I came out way ahead doing that. I
yeah. And you
mean,
know what? Talking about it now, I think mine was in 2020, also my refi, not 21, because we bought it in 18, and I think it was like a 4.25% interest rate, because through my credit union, they were doing like no, like they were like they do no PMI, anything like that. I only had to put like 10% down, and I had it was a sweet deal at the time because a lot of my friends are like mortgage brokers and stuff like that, and I'm like reaching out to them, like, what are the rates? And they're like, yo, we can't touch anything from your credit union. Like, just go right to them. And when I refied, and the only reason I refied was because of that. It was like, it saved us like 400 something dollars a month on our mortgage payment. And I was like, that's huge, right? That's like a whole car payment,
yeah,
basically.
mine went down
And,
6.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
mine
it's
went down 6.
crazy.
Like 550. And that was like the same thing. And the same thing. I bought mine in 19. I didn't want to put a whole lot down because I wanted, so I actually paid for the PMI. I forgot what those were. So I had the PMI on it. And then obviously by refining, it got rid of the PMI. So that was a huge chunk that was gone. Plus the interest rate went down 2%, went from 4 to 2. I think I'm at 2.2 actually. So 4 to, went down 1.8. So percent. So I mean, it ended up between the two things, between the mortgage insurance being gone and the interest rate coming down. It was just under $600 a month that it dropped. So pretty powerful. But
Gotcha.
that's not the world we live in now. So, and that's part of the reason that even sales got a little stagnated there because people are locked in it. I mean, even you're in that boat, right? I moved, but you are like you talked about selling your house, but then you're like, well, my interest rate's so low to do this. It's like people
It'd
are
be
in
a
that
big jump.
mentality.
It would be too big of a jump with our kids. I mean, because we have another property like 5 minutes away that we could move into, and we can take all this profit and run. But it's like we're going from 3,500 square feet to 1,300 square feet with kids, and my wife's like, we're not doing that. Nope. Once our kids leave, then we can move and go to that property. But until then, we're not doing it because it's going to be a pain in the butt for us with all those people in that little old house.
Yeah, and then even if you
But
bought
one thing I wanted to
if you
say,
went out and bought a
Jonathan,
bigger house, you'd be all screwed up because you'd get a killer sales on yours, you get a killer profit, but then you got to go buy a new one. Even if you put all that into it, you're still going to have a mortgage, and it's going to be at 7%. So even if it's for less, even if I was doing the math, and I was like, basically, for me to break even on the house that I was in and the mortgage that I had, I would have had to get my mortgage below $150,000 at the new rates to basically come out even. It's like it shows you
yeah.
that, and that's why a lot of people are holding on.
And that, or a lot of people are renting, to be honest with you. It's weird. Don't ask me why, because the rental market is ridiculous, especially where I live at. Like, you're not finding anything under like $1,500 where I live at. Not even like a one bedroom in the hood. Like it's expensive. Um, but like a lot of people are selling. A lot of people I know they've sold, and they're like, you know what, I'm gonna rent for a year and see where the market ends up. I mean, it hasn't changed that much in the last year, but it has. Well, just like I always tell people, I talk to all the time, they're like, yeah, I think I'm going to hold off on investing. The market has shifted. It's a little higher. It's a little different than it was. Yeah, but it's always gonna change regardless. And like I was talking to my wife recently because we were going to buy these properties in Ohio where we were doing a lot of our rentals at, and we were going to buy these lots, but like, in 2016, nobody wanted to buy there. It was like, we were the only one of the very few investors that were buying in the city. And I mean, we were getting deals at like 30, 40 grand, putting like 30 grand into them because they're all old properties, 100-year-old. And then we were renting them, very low rents, but we were cashing out and still netting probably like $200 to $300 a month in cash flow with not a penny into them. And then when the market shifted in the 2020s, after the pandemic, it was like we sold a lot of our rentals at the height and 22 and 23. And I mean, we were selling them at 140, 160 after getting all these years of rental income, 4, 5, 6 years. Kind of like what the hedge funds do a lot from my understanding. A lot of the hedge funds, they'll buy these properties, run them off for 8, 9, 10 years, and then turn around and sell them with that appreciation of 3 to 4% every year. On top of that, now they're making a ton of money. So I'm kind of mad that I didn't buy more with all the money I was making then. I should have just kept putting the money into the rentals, and it would have been ridiculous compared to what they are now. Like in that same areas where I was buying them for 30, 40, now they're 150, 160, right? And
Yeah,
even
it
though
goes
the
back to what
market
I
has
was talking
slowed
about, the ones we
down,
bought in Florida. I mean, yeah, same thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I mean that's true
crazy.
everywhere.
It's
I mean,
like,
and that's kind of the long term game. I mean that's I mean that's where buying and holding comes into play if you have the ability to do it, right? For people that do buying and holding, obviously that's true. I mean that's the unless you're a day trader, that's the stock market game, right? It's like long term precious metal.
yeah.
I mean, most people. I mean, yeah, you could flip it here and there, but you ain't gonna. I mean, the price doesn't fluctuate so much unless you're doing like massive ounces of it or pounds of it, right? It doesn't mean anything. So it's like most people that are holding on to that and put it away, then it's for long term. So that's always a play. You just got to obviously have the capital to be able to do that. As opposed, that's why most people start with wholesaling, flipping, even with land, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a quick get the money in and then look for
And I
other
did that
areas
for
to
years,
go.
man. I did that for years, and I still go into these BRRR groups, and I always see people asking like, "Hey, man, I got 20 grand. Like, what would you do if you had 20 grand and to start?" And I always tell people like, start wholesaling land, and then once you start building up that nest egg, use those profits put down on a down payment on a house, a rental property, and now you're getting mailbox money, right? Now you're getting those checks. I mean, don't get me wrong, being a landlord is not easy, and most of the time, but we've been very fortunate to have some really good tenants. And for me, like I was talking to someone recently, like for me, I'd rather have a great tenants and make a little bit less money than to continue to to gouge them every year for more and more money and keep raising the rents and raising the rents. Like I got a property that we net like $1,300 a month on. I mean, we own it outright, so we don't owe anything on it. We paid very little for it. The value is through the roof now compared to what it was, but it's like I can literally raise the rents probably to 1,600 total, 1,700 total if I wanted to, but I know I would lose that tenant that's been there for 5 years and the other tenant that's been there for 3 years, right? Because I know what they can afford and can't afford. But so for me, it's like I'd rather have somebody that takes care of my house, that treats it like it's their own. They don't call me for every little thing and complain about, oh, you need to fix this. They fix it themselves. Because like I tell all my tenants, for one, I set that expectation. Like, hey, you got to look at it like this is your house. Even though it's mine, if something goes wrong with it, I'm going to fix it. But don't call me for every little thing, right? If it's a little $15, this needs to be caulked, go get some caulk and caulk it yourself, right? If it's that important and you don't have the money, yeah, let me know. And once I get a guy out there for something else, then I'll have him do it. But it's all about setting expectation with people, man. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it doesn't work. I've had terrible nightmare properties as well, where I had tenant after tenant after tenant, was terrible, messed up the house. I had one guy tattoo my walls. You had another guy steal the fridge and stove out of there, and sell it because he was broke and getting kicked out. I mean, so that stuff does happen. But for the most part, if you want like long-term, residual income, I mean, that's the way I do it is I go to
Yeah.
the rentals
And they don't
section.
have those problems with land, guys. So if you're watching, right, I mean, land, you don't have to worry about that. That's why we stop houses. I mean, and we're looking at other stuff. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not opposed to other forms of real estate, obviously. I mean, and obviously, I've talked about this at length. There's one huge disadvantage to land that, and that's taxes, because there's no real tax. I mean, unless you're holding it for like development and you structure it the right way and things like that, or land banking and different things like that. But if you're just playing the flip game and even owner financing and just making money doing it like that, there's no real tax. There's tax ramifications. There are tax ramifications. There's no tax shelter.
Yes.
And so that you can get, when you're dealing with structures, especially now, because Trump put that thing in his last presidency where he basically let you like depreciate like way up front, a huge amount. And then they thought that was going to go away, but it went through. And obviously he's going to extend that now because back that he's back, it's not going to. So that's going to be going on for years. So the fact that that's in there, it does make some advantages there, but it's harder to get into. So that's why we say like it's a great place. Maybe when you have that as an issue, that's when you start looking at those other things, right? When you're sitting there and
Yeah.
you're like Gina said, I've got X amount of money and my profits are pouring in and I'm not really sure what to do with it. Do I put it and do you put it back? You could put it back into other property and sit on it for land, even that, and then flip it like the next year, depending on how your system is based with your accounting. You'd have to talk to your CPA about that. There's a lot of different ways, but the way I always said that's a good problem when you get to it, right? Because basically you're
Yep.
just like, well, how do I bring my tax burden down? Is what you're looking at, and there's different ways to do that. So we talked about a ton of stuff, guys. So we'll open it up for a little bit for you. I just undid the tools here, so you're free to unmute yourself, start your videos if you want to ask a question that way. If you want to ask a question in the chat, that's open as well. So we'll leave it open for a few minutes here as we sit here and answer any of your
And
questions.
and yeah, and we have one already. Like, what areas are you focusing in? What is your opinion on the Texas market with doing those larger deals? I mean, Texas market is been good. I don't see it changing much. It's one of the states where I think it's number one for people moving to still. So I mean, there's always deals going to be there. Obviously, the prices are going up compared to what they used to be, but that's everywhere. I'm working more in like the central United States area now, which again is something new for me. Trying it, I have worked a state or two there, but again, my main focus has always been the East Coast. But because we talk about it, me and John that lived in North Carolina, at one time together, I guess a lot of people were like, "Oh, they're doing it there," so everybody kind of came over here, which is kind of saturating our East Coast market a little bit. So I'm kind of moving away to get away from it a little bit and see where the competition lies in the central United States.
Yeah, I mean, so again, everybody, you are unmuted. You can turn your videos on if you want, or again, you can ask questions in the chat if you have any. To me, again, what I talked about was rural land. It goes back to basically our initial the stuff that we teach, in our course in area selection and how to select an area. I mean, just making sure that it fits those parameters. Yeah, you say Texas market. I mean, there is no such thing as the Texas market. I mean, Texas is like its own country.
Yeah.
So, and it's huge. I mean, even if it's not, it's huge. Texas is huge. So Texas has multiple markets, right? And so not that long ago, for example, and it might still be, I'm sure they're still in there, but not that long ago, the hottest markets, like the top in the country, were right in Austin, San Antonio. I mean, there was a few of them. Then those things there were like the top. But then if you went like to the west side of the state, like not quite, obviously not El Paso, but just a little bit before that, rural nothing. I don't mean rural. I mean like remote, desolate nothing. Nobody cared about it. So same state, hottest market in the country, booming, can't do anything to absolutely no interest. And that's always going to be the case in every state. I talk about that, right? I should say every state. I mean, Rhode Island, Delaware, but the vast majority, 45 or whatever, 47 out of 50 states, they're huge. So it's every market. I mean, Ginis and I lived about 2 hours apart from each other in North Carolina. We weren't even remotely in the same market there, you
Nope.
know? So that will be, so you got to look at it very area specific, not state specific. It's way too much.
Okay. We have another question. Can an investor flip a property if payments are being made by another buyer free and clear? If you're referring to which what I think you are, which is means that you're saying you're just the investor, you're talking with a seller, and the seller already has that property seller financed to another buyer, to a buyer. Can you flip that property? If that's the case, I would probably say steer clear. If you're the one that's basically you're the seller, you have the buyer making payments, you could sell the note on that property.
Yeah. Well, you could buy the note. You'd have to buy it first from the
You could
seller.
buy the note, yeah,
Yeah, you'd
from
have
the
to buy
seller.
the note from the so if an investor I mean, for example, Genius was just talking about that buying a note. So real world example of something like that, somebody has a note, you know, they're making payments every month. It's $20,000 in payments that they're going to be made. You can go buy that note. You're not buying the property, you're buying the note, and now you become the person that the person is paying to. So you wouldn't necessarily, you're not going to go pay 20 grand for it because that's the face value. That's stupid. You don't pay 20 grand and make 20 grand, right? And obviously it would be over. So it depends on what the monthly is, how good the seller is,
How long the payments
how
been
long they've
coming
been
in?
paying, what the monthly amount is, what the value of the product. There's a whole lot of factors that go into it. But
Yes.
obviously a number that you're okay with, and then you go out and say you buy it, it's $20,000 in payments, and you go buy it for $14,000. So you're giving them 14 to make 20 over the next X amount of years. So you can do something like that, but you can't kick out somebody if that's what you're asking. Like you can't sit there and be like, "Oh, this is a great deal. Sorry, Mr. Buyer." No, they've got an agreement. You're
No, no, no. What I thought he was asking was, can he flip the property if another buyer is making payments? Meaning, like, you're the seller, I'm making payments to you as a seller. You as a seller looking to talk to Mario, the investor that wants to flip that property because he don't have the money to pay for it, so he wants to flip it to somebody else. I mean, it's possible, but when things get too many moving pieces, I'd steer clear because I'm not trying to break no laws and no IRS. I don't mess with the IRS. I put it like that.
Yeah,
I don't
and there
mess with
is,
the
I mean,
IRS.
obviously, there is an agreement, so there is a contract with that person, so they have the right to that property. You can't, so you can, and obviously, part of whether or not you can even buy that, just because you can't just sell it unless it sells, you can sell it. Because some of them say you can't sell them. Some of them say they're not assignable.
Yeah.
Some of them say they're not,
Yes.
very few people do that. If they do, they didn't realize what they were doing. Because like every mortgage company, I mean, it was funny. I signed my mortgage. My mortgage was sold before I even made one payment.
Yep.
So,
Mine was two in.
yeah. So, and now, I mean, I've had my mortgage, my second mortgage, my
Jesus,
second,
dude.
my refinancing. I've had it for a while, and it's been like, five different people I've made payments to in 5 years. So, I mean, it changes a lot.
Yep, yep. Can you expand on how the new TLM CRM can be used to target certain types of markets? The CRM is not the target markets. Unfortunately, that's what you do before you get a list and all of that good stuff is the research, going on, figuring out what's selling, what's not. That's how you're going to find a market. But the CRM itself is not going to help you identify markets or decide if a market is good or not. It just
No,
doesn't.
I think
It
what
just
he
doesn't
means is
do
what
that.
I was talking about. So what I'm saying is I'm gonna find an area that maybe I want to look for something that I can do, a subdivision. And so I'm gonna pull a list of properties that fit that parameter. And then inside the CRM, what I'll do is I will create an automation that's more designed for
Those,
targeting
of course.
those than it is for the general, just day to day flipping, that type of thing, or just buying and selling property. So it's, hey, you've got this property. Have you ever thought of selling it? I'm interested. Even telling them what you're doing, because if they're not doing it, they don't care, right? Explaining like the process out for those type of properties. In those cases, you can be going for on market, off market deals. It really doesn't matter. So we're identifying it, and then you can use it to target those by changing the automation flow, what you send out, if you're going to use like a voicemail, what that voicemail is going to say. If you're using cold calling, what that script's going to say. If you're, with SMS, what that's going to say. The letter, if you change that, what that's going to be. So basically putting them in a completely separate automation that's created just for that specific thing, so that you could track it the whole way down, as opposed to dumping them into the general automation, which is just, hey, do you have property here? I'm interested. Basically try to get the person to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in selling, type of thing. And then going from there, it's much more targeted.
Yep, yep. Um, how would you spend a $2,000 to $3,000 marketing budget if you were trying to get your first deal? That's a very good question, Jason.
Are you answering, or do you want me to?
No, I was asking you.
Oh, um,
Sorry, I
so
should have.
I think Gina's kind of already
Jonathan,
touched on it, and I mean that question. It's a good question, but it's kind of a little lacking. I mean, because do you mean 2 to 3 thousand complete? 2 to 3 thousand right now? 2 to 3 thousand a month? $2 to 3,000 every few months? That's all we've got. I mean, there's a lot of different parameters there. I mean, if we're talking just 2 to 3,000, that's it. That's all I've got. Then it goes back to what Gina said. Go for the best bang for your buck and get,
SMS.
yeah, SMS, get by far the most leads, because for $2 to 3,000 you can be reaching tens of thousands of people. um and so obviously you're not getting quite as quality of a lead, but who cares, because you're still going to get some leads and you're going to get some deals out of it.
Well, yeah,
So
because if you think about it, right, like per letter, if you use a mail house, you're going to spend 60 cents, let's say, on average, right? So every 1,000 letters is $600. At that point, you're at probably 3,000 letters with your $2,000 budget. That's not including any subscriptions you have, any monthly payments, and anything else that you may want to do, right? So if it's per month, that's about what me and Jonathan spend, to be honest, between 2 and 3,000 a month, and that's on everything that we do, from direct mail to SMS to ringless voicemails, things of that nature, including subscriptions and everything else that we're paying for monthly. That's about where I spend a month.
yeah, so a lot of it is just, um again, it goes back to what you're talking about. Now if you have that on a regular basis, then it goes back to multi-channel. That's something that we talk about, multiple touches on people. And so if you can do that, then obviously, and you could set it up. I mean, honestly, the best thing, Jason, is if you want to schedule, we'll do a quick call with you. Genius, you want to if you want to put in
Yeah, give me a
the
second. I'll
Calendly
put it in
link, and
there.
we can, we do like a 15-minute call, and we can kind of get a little bit more. So we'll put this in for anybody. So we'll put the Calendly link in there. I mean, you guys can have a quick 15-minute call if any of you guys want it, and that obviously allows us to expound on your specific things a little bit more and kind of help you get going there. As
Yeah,
Genus is doing that, I'll just look at this here quick.
it's in there
Let's see.
now.
It's fine. Would you stay away from the West Coast? No, I mean that's very, very generic. Would I stay away from Los Angeles? Yeah. Would I stay away from San Francisco? Yeah. Would I stay away from downtown Phoenix? Yeah. But Phoenix is a perfect example because Phoenix is in Maricopa County. Maricopa County is huge, and Maricopa County has like 8 or 10 million people in it. And obviously that includes all of Phoenix. And then it includes all of Phoenix suburbs. And then it includes a bunch of desert land that nobody's doing anything. I mean, not doing nothing with. But as the Phoenix goes from like downtown metro to that tight knit, like high rise living to like the row houses to the tight knit suburbs to the more Scottsdale, those type of areas that have more money to further east, your properties are getting bigger as you get outside the loop until like further, and then it gets into like rural stuff. So that one county where there's a huge city also has these other areas that don't fit that bill at all. So I would never say stay away from an entire region. I've done deals on the West Coast. I mean, you stay again. You find areas that fit the parameters. So every state's going to have them. Even the states people are moving out of, people were leaving California, right? California has growing areas. There's plenty of investable areas in California, right? And that's true everywhere. So you just got to fit the parameters for, is this an area that's investable? And again, there's a lot of different aspects with that.
Yep, yep. And Mario asked, would that be a double close? Uh, what he asked that initial question about basically the somebody making payments to a seller. That wouldn't be a double. That wouldn't be. It would be a double close if you basically put it under contract with the seller and found another buyer. But it wouldn't be a double close if they already have a note and you're just going to buy the note at
Well,
that point.
I mean, I guess you could double close it where you put it under contract to buy the note and then you sell the note before you. I mean, but that's not depending on what the note is. Generally, a lot of those don't go through title. Some will pull title, some won't.
Yeah.
So I mean, it really just depends on a lot of the situations and things like that. So
Yep. Yep. I
Pacific
started.
Northwest, no, not a problem. Pacific Northwest is cities. I mean, Seattle's there. I mean, I don't know what you're talking. I mean, I live right on the Idaho Washington border. I mean, there's plenty of uh investable areas around here. So again, you're looking at it way too broad. What you'd want to do if you want to invest. Let's just use that as an example. Pacific Northwest. You want to be focusing on what areas are growing. And then you want to use like the parameters that we have inside of the course to like and what that document that I shared to help you like look at like different areas that fit there. Like, what are you seeing for sale? What are you seeing for sold? What's the ratio? All of that, the document that I sold in the group. So I guarantee you, I mean, if you're talking about like Washington, Oregon, maybe like parts of Idaho, that Nevada, there's going to be areas that are great and there's going to be areas that are terrible. Guaranteed. That's a huge geographical area.
Yeah.
So you just got to find the parameters that fit. But yeah, you can look at, I think what you're doing here is you look at it what you're looking at to start is very good because you're identifying a geographic region that you want to be in. But then from there, you want to hone that down to actual specific areas inside that geographic region that fit and don't fit. And then obviously the ones that fit, you go ahead and those are the ones you target.
Okay, so I started only focusing on larger deals a few years ago. Are you open to looking at a deal and seeing if it would be something you'd want to jump on to push and close quicker? We don't really partner with our students unless they're like our coaching students. But I'm also in business to make money. If it's a larger deal where it's in an area where I have these connections, I'd be open to looking at it. So yeah, if you want to send it to me, you can send it over to support@thelandmethod.com. I'll take a quick look and I'll get back with you typically within a day or two.
I
Where
get,
can I buy cheap properties for God?
yeah, that one. I didn't know if you saw that. Okay.
Yeah, where can I buy cheap properties for quick flips? Are there websites out there? Are you talking about quick flips for just land? Like are you looking to like do quick double closings? More, you gotta be a little bit more specific there. This can go a lot of different ways here.
You said
Um,
yes. So what I have talked about in that, I mean, I don't know what your situation is as far as what you mean cheap. I mean, are we talking like the properties that are $3,000-$4,000 that people sell, not your buy price, your sell price? Or are we talking about $10,000-$20,000? If you're talking about $3,000-$4,000, what you need to do is you need to go into specific areas and you need to set the parameters like on Zillow or Redfin or one of those things. You need to go on there and you need to set your sale price for whatever your max threshold is. So I wouldn't go super cheap. You don't want to be dealing with properties that are $1,000 to pay in the, you know, I would say 3,000 and up is the minimum. Even at 3,000, you basically got to be getting them next to nothing, and you've got to have you either have one of two things. You either have a title company that's ridiculously cheap, only a few $100, or you're going to be self closing. If you're not doing that, then I would be pushing your threshold up to like 5 grand and up. So, but you could set your pricing on Zillow or Redwood land that has sold between $5,000 to $10,000, and you look at different areas that fit. And obviously, those type of areas tend to be, they're all over the country, but they tend to be more on like the Southern Belt states. Those are there because of that, where like you get a lot of Florida has tons of them. Texas has tons of them. Arizona has tons of them. And there's obviously other pockets of those, but those, they're built for like people that are moving down, maybe want to drop a mobile home, snowbirds, that type of thing. So those are the states that we've seen that in more. But again, just look anywhere. If you're looking very specifically to every state's gonna, again, not every, but because some states are small, but the vast majority of states are gonna have both. They're gonna have some. They just may not have. I mean, Florida's gonna be like every county's gonna have stuff like this. Arizona, like every county's gonna. Whereas, you might be in a different area, like somebody talked about the Pacific Northwest, Washington, you're probably not going to find those type of deals in every county, but there's going to be some. So you just kind of look at it. You can look at it from a very broad perspective and set those things. Then you can kind of zoom into where you see, but set the threshold for the numbers that you like, whatever it is, 5 to 10 grand, 3 to 10 grand, 5 to 15, whatever numbers that you're talking about that you want to focus on. And then, set the sales for like the last 6 months and just see what pops up and see what you get for numbers.
but
I will say
you
those
could
are easier to
also,
sell, but they're not. You're going to get asked for owner financing a lot on those deals. A lot of
yes.
people are going to ask for owner financing on those deals. They are super easy to sell because of that, but just be aware of that. And if you're looking, and I don't know why you're looking at it, but if you're looking at it only from the perspective of budget, you shouldn't be doing that, because there's ways to do larger deals. Don't cut out bigger deals because you don't have the money, because you can transactionally fund. There's different things that obviously that we talk about, and we do resources
There's
too.
people out here that will fund your deal for you if the numbers make sense
Yeah.
also.
So
So, um,
don't shy away from it. The only two reasons that I would say to focus on lower end deals is one, just to get a bunch going, because you will get more in there. And I've had students that I've kind of directed them to do that because they're just getting their own way. It's like, just go buy a bunch of low end stuff and flip them quick. You're not going to make a lot, but at least you're going to feel confident in you. And two, obviously, if you want to play the owner finance game, I think I just made a post, yesterday, the day before, about the one subdivision we did like 119 deals in. We're buying them for a few $100 and selling them for a few thousand. Obviously, that was 8 years ago, but a lot of owner financing in there. But again, you only got a few hundred into it, so we're immediately getting the money back. It's just so if you want to play that game,
yeah,
those are great properties for that.
yep, yep. And I mainly do a lot of seller finance for like lower price, If I pay 5,000 or less, we just close on them, and we just most of the time we'll seller finance those. What are you seeing now for the average closing times for land, developmental properties, beginning to close? I feel it, of course, depends, but I am noticing the larger deals are taking much longer. Yeah, larger deals typically always take much longer. Unfortunately, the higher the price, the less buyer pool you have. You're right. If you're selling a lot for $20,000, reality is there's probably a ton of buyers. Versus if you're selling a lot for $100,000, your buyer pool is gonna be smaller.
Well, she
So
also talked
especially
about
on
development. So like what you were
yeah,
talking
that's
about, because
that's
due
even
diligence, it just depends on how much due diligence they need to do. They're going to build that into the contract, though. You're going to know that.
yes.
So,
Plus, it depends on what you've done as like when you get it, what have you done versus compared to what needs to be done from a developmental,
yeah. But it all depends on
standpoint.
what you mean by development. I mean, if you're talking about one of the big players, they don't even care what you did. They're going to go in and like bring their team in, and they're going to look at
Yeah.
everything because it's got to fit exactly what they want. So they're going to be now. Conversely, if you went in like what I was talking about and did subdivision and you split it up and you did a say you needed there was no sewer, so you did like a perk test on every lot and got it approved and all of that, then those are obviously going to sell faster because you've done that. Now that person doesn't need to do those type of things. So a lot of it just depends on the what you're talking about. I mean, it covers such a huge range. Again, it could be down to days or it could be months, and obviously if it's a development that wants to go in and drop in 500 homes, they got to get their process is going to be getting approval, getting having the meetings, getting putting the roads in. They're going to have to make sure that. I mean, they're not going to go buy the lot just to sit. They're going to they tie it up on now. They'll put money down to do it, but they're going to tie it up knowing that. So, and obviously the thing is, your seller is not interested in doing that because they would have. So if they were, you just need to, when you're dealing with that type of seller, you just need to explain to them what the situation is and say, the reason I need so much time is because I need blah, blah, blah. And you go down is with them and you explain the same thing. So you just handle it based on each circumstance.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, there's resources for transactional funder. There's actually an episode of Crushing Land. You can go watch that. He breaks it all down. So that's right here. I mean, if you're watching this on Zoom right now, but if you're watching this later, I mean, it's right on YouTube. You can listen to the podcast if you prefer on Spotify or whatever service you use. But if you want to watch it, it's still on YouTube. You can watch the transactional funding Crushing Land episode, and numerous students have used him. So yeah, you can watch that. And then obviously financing in general, if you're looking for that, that's a case by case situation. Where there's different ones that we've worked with and that we recommend, and a lot of it just comes down to, again, the parameters. What's the size of the deal? What's the holding time? Does it make more sense to? And I've broken that down in videos too. You can watch. Does it make more sense to get somebody involved as a lender? Does it make more sense to get them involved as a JV, a joint venture? What makes sense the most? And you break that down. Again, there's no set rules in this business. That's the nice thing, right? So it's not like you sit there and you're like, oh, I've got these 5 deals. No, you can 5 different. One could be buying it with your money. One could be buying it with somebody else's money. One could be a double close. One could be buying it outright. I mean, there's a lot of different. Everything's a different play there. So keep
Yeah.
that in mind moving forward. Don't go into like a deal ahead of time, like being like, okay, I need X, because you don't even know that yet. You figure that out as you're doing your due diligence, then you're figuring out your exit strategy on the property. What is this going to be? And again, we break that all down. That's in the course for you. So that's all explained for you.
Yeah, and guys, I mean, again, we're at the end of 2024. We're going into 2025. I know some people that have been following us for a long time. They go watch everybody's stuff and absolutely do nothing. Don't be one of those people. Man, educate yourself, take action, be consistent. If you do those 3 things, I promise you 2025 will be a lot better than 2024. If you're already doing that, great. Keep it up going into 2025. because that's what's needed in order for you to make money and really get out of the rat race that most people are stuck in. And the reason people are stuck there is because a lot of them are not willing to change. A lot of them are taking, just not consistent. And some people buy programs and coaching and whatever the case is and expect it to automatically work without them putting in the work, right? It's just like anything else, man. Your life ain't going to change overnight. Right? This isn't TikTok. You're not going to get Instagram famous overnight and just be rich. It's going to take you to put in the work. It's going to take you to put in the time. It's going to take you to be uncomfortable, right? If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing, in my opinion. So, I mean, you just got to continue to push forward every day. Um, we're in this business every day. We're still grinding every day, year after year. Even though we have education and we sell education, that's not our main focus. As you guys notice, yeah, we always talk about our program and things like that, but we're not in your face all day long. I talk to people all the time. We have 15, 20-minute conversations. It's not all about trying to sell you stuff. It's truly trying to help you. Even if I can give you a tip or two just to kind of get you going. That's what we're here for. That's what we're trying to do, is try to empower people to go out there and get out of that rat race and really change your lifestyle, really change your life, by creating income from real estate. We've been able to do it. We've been able to help a lot of people do it. And we know there's a lot more that can be helped, but it's about, do you really want the help? Do you really want to do it, right? Because you'll be surprised by how many people, they go in and buy a course, they run into a hurdle or two, can't get over it quick enough. They throw it to the side. They go join another group, go buy another course, and then kind of do the same thing. And don't get me wrong, not all courses are made equal, and not all courses are great, but there's a lot of great information out here in all the sectors of real estate. I know probably 90% of these people's courses out here in every sector because I do my research. I've learned a lot of them. I've worked a lot of speakers. So, I know who's good, who's not so good. I mean, I'm not here to bash anybody or name names or anything like that. It's up to you to do your research at the end of the day. But just make sure that you're not scared to take action when the opportunity presents itself, and you're going to be consistent, right? If not, don't spend your money at all with anybody, because anybody's going to tell you whatever they want to tell you. But if you're not willing to put in the time, if you're not willing to be somewhat consistent, if you're not willing to take action, don't invest your money with nobody, because all you're going to do is give it away.
Yeah. Yep. And
My
just
rant
to
is
help
over,
you guys with
Jonathan.
that a little bit too, I mean, just one little thing here to end with, because like I said, for this call, we changed the formatting. We went Zoom only, and that's going to be kind of the thing moving forward. And
Yep.
so we've got some things already lined up for 2025 as far as like our Crushing Land series. For those of you who've been following us for a while, you know that early on it was basically like all guests, and we're bringing that back. But we're kind of changing it around a little bit to help you guys be a little bit more focused. A lot of the guests, and we're still going to do some of this. Don't get me wrong. We're still going to have like shorter versions of Crushing Land where it's still just about a very specific topic, the 10, 15-minute versions. But then when it comes to the guest ones, it's going to be, we're still going to have people that are like involved in the industry, like we've had CPAs, transactions, things like that you need. But we're also bringing in people that are doing the business and doing different things in it and what they've excelled at. Because one of the key scenarios that we've noticed, and I think a lot of people have strayed from, and maybe it's because of what's propagated out there, is people's hands are in 15 different things. And some of the most successful people don't do that. They hone in, right? And so we're going to talk about where we've got people lined up that are some phenomenal land investors. And what you're going to be seeing across the board is, and they hone in on different things. They have the same basic checklist that's going down, but then it's the way that it funnels, as that thing funnels in, it funnels into something very specific. And you're going to be hearing from people that are 7-figure people in land, so you're talking about people that are profiting millions of dollars a year and keeping it very simple still, with just making minor tweaks, minor adjustments, and things. So that's something we're going to help you guys with to see all of that moving forward. And obviously, you don't need to apply all of it, because you may listen to somebody and say that doesn't really fit, but maybe then you love what they do. But then there's somebody else and you're like, man, that resonates perfectly with me. That's the funnel that and the fact that they're doing it shows that I can do it too. So when we talked about changes and things that we're doing for 2025, we kind of focused on mostly our side, mostly our businesses, our land investing businesses. Mine, Ginis, we talked about our things, but that's also something that we're bringing to you for what we're doing for the education side to help you guys look at things maybe a little bit more carefully and be like, oh, okay, man, I understand what that person's saying. And yeah, they're keeping true, they're keeping it simple, they're doing this, and this is what they're able to accomplish because of these minor things.
Yeah, and what I always tell people, man, is I forgot where I was going with this. I just lost my whole train of thought. I'll think about it in a minute. I just lost literally my whole train of thought. Where I was, oh, what I always tell people when you're getting started is go after everything. Make money first. After you make money, if you want to hone in, if you want to niche yourself, and it's okay. But in the beginning, some people focus on certain things, right? Some land investor trainers, they focus on certain things, right? Whether it's, oh, we only focus on rural land, or we only focus on, this or that, or whatever the case is. I always, and what me and Jonathan always teach, especially our coach students, hey, let's focus on everything. Once you make some money, you build up your nest egg, then you could say, hey, I only want to deal with 2-acre lots, or I only want to do commercial lots, or I only want to do subdividing. But if you come in with that focus right away, more than likely it's going to take you longer because you're getting a list this big and you have to narrow it all the way down to get this many leads, right? So it's going to, for the most part, it's going to take longer than what you think.
And
so
you need to
if you
know
just
it well
focus on
enough. If
everything,
you're just starting, you don't even know it yet.
exactly.
So you might be honing in on something that everything you're honing in on, the idea makes sense, but you're doing it here, and the area that you should have been doing it was here, and so it gets you absolutely nothing. So you've got to understand that too. And I think that's a big part. I mean, again, I'm not going to go out there, and I know a whole lot less as far as the education side. I know a whole lot less than Ginis does because I haven't worked in that sector hardly at all, other than my own and some coaching I did before. I don't know what other people are what they talk about in their programs. I don't follow it nearly to the level that he does. What I know is what people tell me that they hear. Because we have people that come all the time and come to us and say, this person, sometimes they say names, sometimes they don't. I'm not going to say names, but this other program said X, or this other program said this, or whatever it may be. And the problem is that it's the basic, it's like they're training you on how to use a tool, but without training you. It's like they're training you how to use the tool, but not training you on what the tool does. It's like, it's like, take somebody to a job site and you show them a tool and you show them everything about the tool, but then you don't actually show them what it does. What good does it do? Right? And that, I think, is the problem. They're not really showing you, like, they're not giving you the land education aspect, the real estate education aspect of you need to hone in and understand what this means, and evaluating markets and understanding where things are going, and all of those aspects before you jump in and use this thing. Because if you're trying to use it but you don't really know what you're looking at, it just creates confusion. Oh, I've got this great deal and I've got it under contract for $60,000, and okay, well, what's all the parameters? I don't know anything about it. I just got it because I did what you said, and I got somebody to sign, and then it's like, and then the deal blows up, right? So that's where it comes down to what Ginis was saying, and we talk about all the time, is find a price range that fits, set what's good for you, a minimum and a maximum, and go after every property that fits that in the area you're looking at. And then after you get a few, and it's funny, because we can say this from experience, it's happened over the years, is what people tell us that they're going to work on. This is what I want to focus on, but I'll listen to you guys, and I'd say, I don't know what, 90% of them don't ever go back. I mean, we had one guy that's one of our better students, and they're going to be on Crushing Land, but him and his partner have built a huge land investing business. And he was very state specific, and he wanted to do deals there, and he was all this, and we told him it was a little oversaturated. And he did like a 180, and he went to another state, and now he's like, we're the premier person, and they're not even near each other. They're not related, totally different types of property. And he was like, oh, well, we'll be good here, and we'll get our feet wet, and then we'll go back to the state we want to be in. Never went back. Zero interest, because he got so good in that one, and he realized what it was doing. So a lot of times you hear something and you just convince yourself, man, I want to do this. And then you start doing this and you're like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Right? I want to be here.
And
so,
the biggest thing though with that individual you're talking about is, for one, he's a go-getter. which means he takes action and he don't play around. And for two, he was willing to learn, even though he had did some things in the past that didn't pan out for himself and lost a lot of money. When he got in, he was willing to take more risks, right? And that's another thing that's big because some people lose a little bit of money and they're like, I'm not taking this risk. I'm done. I'm out. I'm doing something else. And that just isn't how successful people think.
Yep. Yep. So, I mean, just
So
lessons to be
with
learned.
that
And
being
again,
said, we have one
that
more
stuff is going
question.
to be on Crushing Land moving forward because you're going to hear these stories from him and from others that did that. And the thing you're going to see is that they adjusted and then stayed true and they didn't jump through 18 different things. And you're going to keep seeing that over, and it's in different areas, but you're going to keep seeing it over and over and over again moving forward.
Yep, yep. So we have one more question, and then I guess we can end it. We can end it there. What are the tools, ways that you use to dispo a deal? Something you have, but don't quite have the connections yet for that big deal. I took on a deal because it was way too good not to, but don't have my buyer lined up just yet. And in a situation like that, um, what we're doing is we're putting enough time on that contract to find a buyer, right? Remember, land is different than houses in any case, in anyway. So, with a house, a lot of times you could sell it pretty quick, which is not always the case in today's world right now. But with land, it's always going to take you a little bit longer to sell. So when in situations like that, you want to leave yourself enough time that you have to really go out there and find a buyer. 30 days, 60 days is not enough a lot of times, especially for a bigger land deal. So in cases like that, you just got to leave yourself enough time that allows you to comfortably go out there and really market and try to find somebody for that big deal that you have.
Yeah, and even if you
Jonathan, you
think
want
you
to
have a
add
buyer,
anything?
doesn't mean you do, right? I mean, that's I think something that people are learning the hard way right now. They're like, "Oh, I flipped all these properties to this person. I'm just going to keep getting them under contract." But like we talked about, some of these builders, they're drying up. So the builder says, I'm not buying anymore. Well, you were my buyer. What do you do now? Now you're going to go find a buyer, or you're going to cancel your contract. So we've always left enough time. Don't you don't count the deal till it happens. So just because you have somebody that's interested and says, "Yeah, I'm interested in buying more," what happens if they look at it and they're like, "Yeah, it doesn't quite fit my parameters." There's a lot of different things. So always make sure that you have enough on that. And then again, what we teach, and that was a whole area in the Land Riches Blueprint that we just redid, was marketing and like how to move these properties numerous different ways, to be able to get that going with what's working right now. And obviously that's something you can look at and go back to that module, look at that module if you haven't, the whole marketing module in the Land Riches Blueprint, and break that all down. The other thing to keep in mind is we're talking about 2025 goals, is that we are also going to be changing some stuff. We talked about what we're doing inside of our own businesses, but also inside of the program. Some of the things we talked about, keeping in mind that first quarter of this year, there's going to be a whole new look, redesign, updates to the Land Riches Blueprint and the Gold coaching. So if you have either of those, you're going to see that as well here in the next couple of months. So look out for that. Obviously, we'll send emails, we'll post it in the group and things like that, so everybody's aware of that. But keeping everything fresh and up to date. We've already done big updates to it as far as where things change, as I've talked about already. But then also we'll be having that fresh look and making some other adjustments here moving forward. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. This call went pretty long. Glad that you basically all hung in and we're here and asking great questions. And hopefully you got something out of it as we both shared our outlook for 2025. Also, what we're going to be doing, hopefully that helped you. And yeah, as Gina said, just keep plowing forward, get involved. The worst thing you can do is sit around and do nothing. Get active and get going there and see amazing things in 2025. And don't forget to keep watching the group, keep following us. Look at different things here as we have some major things coming out as far as like the crushing land and all that. That's going to help you looking at these different things and what really successful people are doing right now. So again, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on Crushing Land.